So thank you all for showing up this morning, or whatever time it is in whatever time zone you're used to. Really appreciate it. Lots of empty seats in the front row, so feel free to move on up if you want. Or not, that's cool too, that's fine. So what I'm going to talk about this morning is a process and a report that came out of that process on the future of libraries that came out of a task force on the future of libraries at MIT that ran from October 2015 through October 2016. So the first question is, how many of you are familiar with that task force, have read the report or the executive summary of that report, have heard of it, have any idea what I'm talking about? Okay, all right, that looked like about half. What I thought I'd do today, though, is kind of highlight what I think is most interesting about what we did at MIT in terms of process and a little bit in terms of outcome. Couple of warnings. There's nothing very technical about this talk, so if you were hoping for a real how-to technical talk, there are other sessions going on. I won't hurt my feelings at all. This talk is more about how, I warned Kathleen Shearer this morning, Kathleen from CORE, that she stole most of my thunder yesterday in the talk that CORE gave about a global platform, a global open repository, except that what we're trying to do at MIT and what I hope will be valuable to folks for me to talk about is, CORE is presenting an international version and vision, actually, of this networked set of open global platforms of content. And I think my perspective is to get there, we need local visions for that as well. And so what I'm talking about is how we at MIT got to a local vision for that. So again, this is how we got to that vision, and we got it campus-wide. So I think I hope is compelling about this is that through institute-wide task force at MIT, we got campus-wide buy-in for a vision of the libraries that's more than books and buildings, but that really is, and here I quote from the report that we presented, a networked set of global platforms replete with content, data, metadata, images, audio files, lab notebooks, course materials, and more. So the main theme of a years-long work on the future of libraries was a call to move the repository from the margins of library work to the center. And that's really important to us at MIT, and I think important to the vision that others have laid out on a broader scale. So, backing up a bit, actually, my whole talk was originally a how come instead of a how talk, but then yesterday at the opening, they said this is a conference where you talk about how, not how come, so now I'm going to talk about how. So I changed my whole talk. So let me talk about how we started. So I came to MIT as a new director in February of 2015, and in my first conversation with my boss, the provost, he said to me, yeah, so the first thing I need you to do is I need you to lead the campus in a conversation about the future of libraries, sort of what libraries, research libraries should look like heading into the future, especially at a place like MIT. And for those of you who don't know, a place like MIT means a place that is heavily an engineering school, also has very strong programs in humanities, social sciences, very high-ranked School of Management and Business, architecture and planning, science, but it is at its heart an engineering school, and the notion of solving big problems by doing things and building things permeates the entire campus, and of leveraging technology in the service of solving big problems. That's sort of an ethos that permeates everything that happens at MIT. So I was asked to lead the campus in a conversation on the future of libraries writ large, but especially at a place like MIT. And after being on campus for about 6 months, I finally figured out that the way that those kinds of conversations happen at MIT is through these sort of faculty-led task forces. So I formed a task force This is some of what the provost said to kick it off. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to push to, oh, it already did, sorry. I'm reading it in not real time, my notes are on here. Sorry. So the task force charge is here, and for me, the key to our approach was that we framed this as a research question. Right? And so we didn't ask how well does the library serve students and faculty right now and what could we do better. We ask that every year anyway. Every library asks that every year anyway, and you get the same answers, and I don't know why we keep asking it, but that's another talk. Rather, we frame this as a thought exercise about what the future of information management and of scholarly communication could and should be to advance the kind of research and teaching that our scholars wanted to do. And then the real charge, and this is from the email message that I sent to the school deans to recruit members from among their faculty. And also we sort of hand-selected on advice from library staff who'd been there much longer than I did and knew the faculty and knew students. We targeted for invitations some faculty whose research was aligned with sort of what the vision that we were sort of hoping would come out of the task force. And in many cases, they were scholars and faculty whose research was aligned, but they didn't know it was. So, you know, the task force ended up being co-chaired by a faculty member in computer science who worked on algorithms and artificial intelligence. Another one of the working group co-chairs directed the Center for Civic Media at MIT. We had biologists, we had faculty members from all 5 schools. But this was really, we really weren't looking for faculty and students who would engage as customers of the current library. We really were asking them to sort of be strategic and visionary about the future. And I think that affected what we got. So some details. The task force ended up larger than I anticipated, and in some ways, in terms of lessons learned, probably larger than it should have been, although there are pluses and minuses to that. But what happened is we came up with an original list of faculty and staff and students for the task force. When we released that list, we got requests from other faculty saying they wanted to be on it. I don't know how many of you work in libraries? How many of you get that when you are trying to ask faculty to do something? Yeah. So that was pretty remarkable. I knew we were onto something. And I really do think it was about, hey, here's this kind of interesting problem. The future of libraries is really a pretty interesting problem, right? Come and help us like pick it apart and solve it with us. And they were eager to do that. So we ended up with 20 faculty from all 5 schools at MIT. Ranging from faculty who at the first meeting of the task force said, look, I got to be honest, I haven't stepped foot in the library in X number of years. Everything I do, I use online databases, to faculty who bring their class to our special collections reading room every week because their research and their teaching absolutely depends on the physical collections that we have there. So we had this huge range. From all 5 schools. We had staff from relevant campus units, certainly some library staff, staff from Central IT, staff from the Office of Digital Learning, staff from the MIT Press, and graduate students and undergraduate students. We collected input for a year through a series of open forums that we held on campus. The first open forum that we had, more than 60 people showed up. That was faculty and staff, which was pretty remarkable. We're not that big of a school, so that was quite a remarkable turnout. In fact, the vice provost for research was jealous because she said she got fewer faculty to show up at her forum on MIT taking a stance on climate change. So I felt pretty good about that. We also collected input through an online idea bank via email, and then we had targeted conversations with interested groups on campus, the faculty policy committee, the undergraduate curriculum committee, postdocs, the various folks across campus. as you might imagine, we found a variety of opinions. We ended up in some heated discussions about a number of topics, some of which you see up here. We came in the task force itself, we came to euphemistically refer to these as productive tensions. I like to still talk about them that way. Some of us still carry the scars around from those productive, tense conversations. But what was, again, I can't emphasize enough the idea of having faculty who were charged with approaching this question as thoughtful strategists, right? Setting the task before them like that meant that they argued with each other when they disagreed, right? And they kept, because they're scholars and because they had this mutual charge that they were told to do, they kept talking until they could find some common ground and mutual understanding. So that really helped in terms of us coming up with a report on, a vision for the future of MIT libraries that this diverse group of faculty could get behind and promote to the campus. So that vision, after a year of work, right, we did produce a preliminary report. It is available openly. That would be kind of silly if it wasn't. It's available, and actually it's available as a PDF if you prefer. If you like it that way, it's at this futureoflibraries.mit.edu. It's also available on a platform called PubPub that was developed out of the MIT Media Lab, and it's a new interactive dynamic publishing platform created at the MIT Media Lab that allows for basically comments or post-publication peer review kind of commenting on it there. So we were able to collect feedback in a variety of ways by publishing it there. It just didn't seem right, given the themes of our report, to publish our report as a static PDF only. So we're trying to practice a little bit of what we were preaching. But the main theme of the task force vision for the future of the library is of the library as an open global platform, right? And that included for us an expanded notion of the communities we might serve. It included an innovative and participatory approach to discovery and use of information. It included recommendations about recommitting to stewardship of scholarship in all its forms, and to committing the libraries to supporting the sustainability of the structures, tools, and systems used to produce, disseminate, and preserve the scholarly record. And then finally, there was a recommendation that MIT establish a Center for Research in Information Science and Scholarly Communication, because much of what the task force envisioned for the future of libraries and much of what they wanted us to do remains not particularly well researched, and it involves sort of tools and models that have not yet been invented. So again, 10 recommendations, but the ones that I think are most relevant to this crowd were about aiming for comprehensive digital access, for open dissemination of all of MIT research, not just the finished products, but the full life cycle of research where it's relevant to the world, and building, using, and linking our repository to a network of open content repositories. And this is where we recognize that the challenges are really mostly social, and that those are both and political. And those are both on social and political challenges on our own campus, but also in ensuring that our work is compatible and networked with other institutional, disciplinary, government, nonprofit repositories. And also where we recognize the need for dedicated R&D work. MIT has a real history of openness, right? So this conclusion of the task force wasn't a huge surprise, right? So MIT started open courseware over a couple of decades ago, sharing the syllabus and eventually courses openly from MIT openly with the world. To the 2009 Faculty Open Access Policy, which was, I think, the second of its kind in the US, an institute-wide policy granting open access to faculty journal articles, of which, by the way, 46% now are actually available through our institutional repository. 46% of the journal articles written by MIT faculty are openly available to the world. Thank you. Somebody's nodding and saying, thank you. That's a remarkable freaking number, please. Thank you. Okay. And I won't say what the remaining, I can't do the math that quick, 54%, a huge chunk of that are from one particular publisher. Okay. But MIT's commitment to openness is not just a philosophical one. It's also built, it also comes from a recognition that readers, human readers, are not the only readers of our content, right? And so the task force really hammered home that the content that the libraries provide must be open to text and data mining programs, to algorithms, to machine learning tools, to robots, because by doing that, we can truly provide content in a way that is going to advance knowledge and accelerate scientific research in the future. So that was a really important part of our thinking there, that it wasn't just about, making sure that everyone everywhere can read our journal articles was important, although that's important. But a recognition that the future of scholarship involves machine learning, AI, text and data mining, and if those kinds of tools and that kind of research is pointed at only a subset of the scholarly record, then the answers we get are going to be incomplete and biased and not going to advance our knowledge of the world as completely as they should. Let's see where I'm, okay. Finally, our task force was really clear that they wanted the library to exercise a really light touch in dictating the interface through which people and machines might access and interact with our content and our metadata. So at MIT, there's a long and quite proud history of hacking. And at MIT, hacking is a term used to describe clever and often sophisticated pranks, usually involving some engineering know-how, right? And usually pulled off by students. And the most famous hacks at MIT involve putting things on top of the famous dome, which covers, by the way, Barker Library, the engineering library, right? And by putting things, I mean things like fire trucks and police cars and other things are placed on top of the dome. And we used that idea of hacks, of clever interventions to do things that people wouldn't think that you would do, to suggest in the task force report that our libraries, as open global platforms, have to be designed in such a way that they inspire students and scholars and citizen scientists to hack the library by developing innovative uses, tools, and programs that we can't imagine yet. And we conclude the report by saying that, to our mind, the success of the library will be seen in the creative ways users exploit it to accelerate science, increase knowledge, and solve the world's greatest challenges. So again, you know, the how come, I think, is important. It certainly, again, themes of openness, of creativity, of innovation, of really everything we do at MIT being about advancing our knowledge and advancing discovery and science in the service of solving big problems. That thread is prominent throughout our task force report, but I think that for this crowd, again, I think the main theme here is we've got folks like CORE and this community all sort of committed to open repositories and networks of open repositories, but getting the commitment and the buy-in on our individual campuses, I think, is key to actually being able to make real progress on a global vision. You've got to have a local vision as well. And so I hope that by talking about how we did it at MIT and how we frame themes, how we frame the work, will be helpful to those who want to do something similar on their campuses. So I think that's it. And I welcome your questions. And I'm one of those people who doesn't actually likes comments as much as I like questions. So if you just want to stand up and say, yeah, us too, that's great.
So we have some generous time for questions. Do we have any takers? At the back there.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for your talk. I'm really impressed with the MIT vision, as you know, and I have a couple of slides often in my presentations that talks about your report. But I think one of the questions I have is, how do we move from our money towards supporting that vision and away from the subscriptions? Because that's really where all of our money is tied up, and I can't see, without a plan to kind of incrementally move our budgets towards that, I don't see how we'll be able to achieve the vision. So I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that is kind of one of the big questions, right? And I can tell you what we're trying to do at MIT, yeah, I'll tell you what we're trying to do at MIT, and then I'll speculate, because that's what you get to do when you get to stand behind the podium. So, what we did at MIT fairly early on in my tenure there, I was able to hire a new associate director for collections, and Greg Yao, and he, within 6 months, came to me with a plan to reorganize the collections directorate. And I have to tell the story because it's a great story. He came in late one night. We were both working too late. I don't recommend that. I'm a big fan of work-life balance, but once we were both working late. And he comes and he says, "Chris, I have this crazy idea about how to reorganize the collections directorate." I said, "Okay, I like crazy ideas." And I liked his idea, but I said, "You know what, it's late, we should sleep on it. We'll see if we still think it's a good idea in the morning." Came back and it was a great idea the next morning. And what we did is we moved all of our collections dollars and the collection strategists, the ones who spend the money on buying the books and paying for the subscriptions and all of those dollars, under our scholarly communications office. So everything that we do around collections is driven by the values and the sort of frame of mind of Ellen Finney, who has been our scholarly communications librarian for many, many years and understands this landscape and understands what we're trying to move, how we're trying to move scholarly communication towards a healthy system. And so it allows, it sort of puts our money where our mouth is, right? And we vote with our dollars. Now, I get that doesn't all, and how that plays out is we're actually carving, every year trying to carve aside some of the collections budget to spend on things like Open Library of the Humanities and other open access kinds of ventures. And we're being careful about how we, the money that we spend on paywall subscriptions, although we haven't canceled any big deals yet. We haven't canceled Elsevier, we haven't canceled Springer. This is being recorded. I wasn't going to call out any publishers by name, sorry. Or et cetera, et cetera. But we are able to, we've sort of started by sort of sort of organizing ourselves in such a way that we're saying it's not just, scholarly communications and our sort of philosophy of open access isn't over here without any funding or resources, and it's just a nice-to-have thing that we do. It's running our collections decisions and our budgets. I think that so that's what we're doing here. The speculation is I get the sense that the big funding agencies in the U.S. at least are really interested in helping us move some things forward where we're able to do something that is truly collaborative. And I think we'd be smart to really, really work together. And I think I like to, brag about our 46%, and I'm as competitive as the next person. But in this arena, we have to stop thinking our individual campuses and institutions need something special or are super special, because we have to do it together. And so I think that if we can really commit to that there are funding agencies that will want to back us.
Nick, how far have you got along, and what sort of difficulties have you experienced?
Can you be more specific?
In
because I experience difficulties every day in every arena, so.
In moving from your old system to your new system?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, one of the lessons learned, one of the sort of, if you analyze the pros and cons of how we did this, right? As I said, there were library staff on the task force, but it was me and two of my staff. So one of the difficulties we've had, quite frankly, it's a blessing to have, literally the blessing of the Institute on this vision, right? So we know we've got the faculty behind us. We presented this vision at a faculty meeting. It's been presented to the president and the provost. They've sort of said, this is the way we want the libraries to go. But the library staff weren't super involved along the way. So bringing the library staff along, we've spent quite a bit of time doing that. And that has taken the form of really, in some ways, just socializing them to what's in the report and what it means for their jobs and what it means for how we do things. So there's been a social component to it, a socializing component to it. The other piece of it is, we had some technical debt. When I came in, the libraries had some technical debt in terms of the systems that we were using anyway and our technical infrastructure. So we had to sort of we're still having to stabilize some things and get our own sort of house in order before we can start really, nobody's going to want to link up and network to what we have right now. So we've got to, oh, man, why am I saying these don't tweet that. Please don't tweet that. Because I've got staff who are working their butts off, and they're terrific. So, but we have a ways to go. So it's the socialization piece. It's making sure that our house is in order technically, and that we have that. And then, our struggles are the same as anyone else's in the kinds of issues that Kathleen brought up. We still have to keep bringing in the subscription content to feed the machine while we're trying to, we have to serve the present while trying to invent the future, and that balance is a tough one. But what I like about it is we've got, in terms of trying to invent the future, we have every time anybody's like, slow down, I need you to just be right here today serving our immediate needs. I can say, yeah, but the Institute said, MIT said, this is what I'm expected to do.